You're listening to KGNU, Boulder, Denver, and Fort Collins. This is Electronic Air. I'm your host tonight, DJ Dave Alex, with a very special edition of Electronic Air. This is the silver anniversary of the Electronic Air show here on KGNU. That's the 25th anniversary. We've been going for 25 years strong, believe it or not. An amazing accomplishment. And we got a great show for you tonight that kind of goes over some of the early days and the history of Electronic Air through the voices of the originating DJs themselves. They got back together and did an interview special for this show. You know, KGNU and Electronic Air specifically were innovators in internet radio, believe it or not. This wasn't a thing that was happening 25 years ago. People would normally just log in with their modem on their computer, 14.4, connecting up to America Online, and listen to KGNU and Electronic Air. And you'll hear some stories about this in the forthcoming interviews. If you want to listen to more Electronic Air, we have a lot of years worth. We don't have all 25 archived, but we have a lot of Electronic Air available to you. You can go to afterfm.com/electronic air to get every episode of this show for the last many years. You can get the current playlist for everything that we're playing tonight on this show at afterfm.com. And you can get more information on KGNU and the community radio in general at kgnu.org. And finally, if you're interested in listening to my archives, afterfm.com/DJ Dave Alex will take you there. Let's get started with an interview from founding members E23, Dubgoddess, and Captain Scarlett. Here we go.
Happy birthday, Electronic Air. This is Selena. I turned into Dubgoddess by the end of Electronic Air when I was producing, but I was there at the beginning, and it was the most fun time being at KGNU in general, but having my peers who loved electronic music and inspired me for decades and still do. Electronic Air's going strong. Happy birthday, 25 years. Where are the women DJs?
Well, this is George, and back in the day I was known as Captain Scarlett, which was a name based on a cartoon character that wore a little red capey and saved the planet constantly. And also Aquatic Ape was something I went by, but I had a blast with Electronic Air. It was great to be there. 1995, I would put us down as great quarter of a century. And, I would be so stoked if we could make this to 50 years. And I don't see why not. So anyway, happy birthday, Electronic Air. It's been great.
Well, thank you for joining us. It's great to see you. And, George and I were just prattling on about, some of our early memories of how we formed the show and kind of how things came together. So I want to get your take on it too, because this is a milestone, anniversary for the show that originally everyone told us was just a fad. It was going to go the way of disco, right?
Even though it was very popular in Europe and South America, and nobody would listen to us. George, you came into the station and I was doing the ASA.
That's right.
But I came to the front desk because of a phone call that I'd gotten.
That's right.
And that's when you came in the door.
Yeah,
and I was like, you're British. Oh my, I don't even know what I said, but you said, yeah, I want to get some electronic music on the radio. And I'm like, me too. I already played on the afternoon sound, and it just took off. You guys did so much of the back work, and I was just so grateful that it did happen, and I got to be part of it.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
And actually, although you say it was, big in Europe or whatever, it was actually big in the States as well. It just
Detroit, is that what you're talking about?
No, just
it's all over.
I mean, it was reaching out to people. So when as we were talking about, there was a techno record store on the hill there in Boulder, being set up by Nathan.
But it wasn't right away, was it? I mean, when did that start?
It was happening. It was there.
It was. I was on the program committee. Neil was on the board.
Mm-hmm.
I never talked to him about stuff, but he was really pushing for electronic air to come on, for us to have a real time.
Yeah.
So I'm still talking before.
Right. Yeah.
So we had a show. And the program committee, we had a lot of pushback. And it was like, I just kept bringing up the mission, that this is music that's not widely heard. And that's our mission. What is the problem,
We actually wrote up at that point in time for the program committee, we wrote up a application/booklet of explanations.
That's right. Yeah, we had a full
genres.
We had a whole prospectus.
We did. And then one of the things our point was, which was sort of true, was that techno, or certainly some aspects of techno, was the new jazz. This is the new jazz.
That caused a lot of trouble.
Because, of course, that's kind of true in a sense, certainly up to a point. But, of course, the issue was jazz was a very big thing at KGNU, probably still is. So, those nighttime shows is kind of what we had to kind of dig into. And
yeah.
So the jazz angle, I think I was kind of behind that partly.
At that time, there was so much drum and bass, right. And it had that real jazz orientation to it. I was in Texas in the late 80s, and that was when I caught the bug. And, I had already been into electronic music, but stuff that was more Tangerine Dream and Jean-Michel Jarre and Kraftwerk. And
me too.
Stuff that was kind of more in this progressive sphere, Tomita and Kitaro. And,
right.
But then I got, I was also into the techno pop stuff, the, Depeche Mode and New Order and Eurythmics. Yeah. And then I got exposed in a Dallas nightclub at a time when MDMA was still legal in the state of Texas. So you just got it. You just got it at the club. They gave you a pill when you came in. You paid $5, got your pill, went into the club. And that's where I first got turned on to Acid House. And so when I came to Colorado in 1993, it was a little bit perplexing to me that things still really had never taken off here. And just kind of learning about, the more of the jam band orientation, I guess, of, the Boulder music scene, right. Kind of explained it for me. But I remember the first month that I was living in Boulder after moving to Colorado, I was at a friend's house. We were drinking beers, and I heard Christian Death playing on the radio, and I thought, wait a minute, what? No one would actually play Christian Death on the radio. And I said, what is this? I said, oh, it's KGNU. Yeah, this is all the stuff that they play. It's all free form, just crazy stuff. And of course, I had a background in radio, and at the time, I was doing production work for KTCL, and so I found out where the station was. I drove down there and introduced myself, and after about 5 minutes talking with Marty Derlin and Catherine Gollery, I found myself in a paid position doing the satellite engineering because I actually knew how to run the demodulators.
Oh, wow. I never knew that.
Yeah.
Well, do you remember that KGNU got a grant? Internet radio.
Yeah.
And I thought that we were one of the first radio stations that was on the internet.
Yeah.
And then Electronic Air was on the internet, and I thought it was the first show from KGNU that was on the internet.
I think it was.
It was.
Yeah.
It was a 14.4 feed, which I think managed mono, and we were pushing that out at the same time as we were doing the show, and we got a reply over email or something, must have been email, from New Zealand, and we were like, wow, we've got music to New Zealand, and we got told off for that as well. Because it's like, hang on a minute, this is community radio for the Boulder region. You're not really supposed to be reaching out to New Zealand, but
What?
Yeah.
No. We didn't get Susan. Well, I'm just.
No, that was that early.
We never knew what we were doing. We were just doing what we were doing.
And Tim Buzak was there.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that was his baby, right?
That was his baby. He did the legwork on the grant and got the ISDN in there, and we got the server and the real producer license, and But what George is referencing is accurate. I remember that very clearly. We got the SmackDown that we were broadcasting to other locales outside of Boulder community because that was not in the mission of KGNU at the time.
So who gave you the SmackDown? I never knew that.
It was probably Catherine, and it wasn't a serious SmackDown. It was just like, well, come on, guys. Remember that this is radio.
I remember very clearly that it was, okay, you guys can do this, but just turn it off when your show's over. And it was like, what? Wait a minute, don't you understand? Like, the station can be on everywhere all the time. And they said, no, we're not. That's not what we're about. You guys can do electronic air. Just do us a favor. Just turn that off as soon as you're done with it. And we did that. And that was probably the first couple of years of us webcasting. And then I remember we got written up in 1,000 Words magazine from Chicago. And we also got written up from another underground independent magazine out of Paris. And suddenly we started getting pledge money from people that were in these different locations. And I remember very specifically, I worked Friday shifts at KGNU doing, the satellite engineering, but I also usually did the afternoon sound alternative on Fridays. And then I did a front desk shift in the morning. So I was there all day. And I remember Joanne Cole coming to me with Catherine and saying, hey, we want you to explain this. And they laid down like a series of letters and checks. And I was sitting there at the front desk and I'm like, what are we doing? And they said, well, you need to explain this. Why are we getting pledge money from all these different places? And I said, well, it's because we're streaming on the internet and people in different places are listening to us. Yeah. And at that point, I think there was a pretty quick consensus from KGNU that, hey, webcasting is a good thing. Can we just leave that turned on after your show?
Yeah.
See, I never knew all this stuff. It's like, where was I? I didn't know the backstory on stuff.
You were grooving, girl. You had more important things to be doing, getting into the beats. Come on. Okay, so I want to hear specifically, give me a couple of tracks or a couple of artists or a couple of labels from that era that hooked you, that you really loved.
It's a blue cover.
Oh, that one, yeah.
It's got grooves in it, and there's a hole in the middle.
I have to go downstairs and look, but the ones that I was thinking about contributing to the show maybe is when they're talking about DMT and
like Space-Time Continuum with Terrence McKenna.
That's who it is.
Yes.
I played that a bunch. I got the CD.
Yeah.
That's one of my faves.
Oh, that's cool. Yes, we'll make sure to get a track from there on.
Yes.
George.
So I mean, as you know, I was doing a PhD actually at the University of Sheffield, which is in the north of England, and I started doing that in 1990, and I immediately had connections with the University of Colorado and with NOAA in Boulder, and then started to visit Boulder. But of course, Sheffield in the north of England at that time, for whatever reason, became quite a center for what was becoming techno. In particular, 1990 was the starting date. It might even have been 89, but I'm saying 90 was the start of Warp Records.
Yeah, Warp. Yeah.
And at first, Warp Records, I mean, they're almost an empire now, and slightly different in where they ended up. But at first, they were purple 12-inch singles. The first 12 or so of them were all classics. And there was actually a record shop down towards the center of downtown Sheffield, also called Warp Records, although they weren't exactly the same thing, but I guess they were as well. And also there was a record studio there called Fon Studios. Well, also down there, of course, were the Human League, ABC, Heaven 17. You know, there was a Sheffield Sound, which was this. I mean, you know, all of those are actually really pretty cool, innovative kind of 80s pop stuff. Certainly, Human League became huge, of course.
Yeah, all that Martin Ware stuff.
Anyway, I'd come out of that, and there were several other things going on, and there was also a bunch down in Birmingham, the other Birmingham in the middle of England, called Network Records, and they were doing a thing as well, and they've been pulling in music from Detroit artists like Derek May and one or two others, and were producing compilations. So when I came to Boulder, I was like, this was my stuff, you know, and then I was meeting people and like, oh yeah, I know this stuff. So if I were to talk about some tracks from that time, from Warp Records, the most famous of the first 10 from Warp Records was LFO. LFO by LFO. That actually got to number 12 in the pop charts in the UK, which was incredible because it's a tiny little thing. Probably 1,000 release at the time, but then much bigger. From Network Records, there was Self-Hypnosis was a track by Nexus 21.
Love that track.
And that was one of those where I was like, what is this? I can't even figure out how this, you know, one of those things where like, I can't even work out how this has been done. Or what is it? What, you know, have they got like a llama or something and they're stretching its intestines? How do you make that sound? You know, it's one of those moments. And of course, those guys became Alternate and became brief pop stars in about 91 with their face masks on and stuff like that.
That's right. They were made for today.
They're still doing it. They're still out there. You can follow them on Facebook. Yeah, they're still going. So there was that Network and Warp. And I think, Brian, I mean, again, you'll agree with me on this one. Up in Manchester, the huge innovators were 808 State.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll have to throw some 808 State on, and I can, because everything they did was brilliant.
I played them on the Afternoon Sound a ton.
Yeah.
Love those guys.
And they were unique as well, because they were very kind of poppy in a way. They were just one of those not quite definable things. They're not really techno. Right. They were their own thing.
Pretty dreamy too. Yeah. They had their ambient dreamy thing that I loved.
Yeah, they did.
That's right. Yeah, their first album was one of the definitive acid house releases. In fact, I put it at the top. I think it's just the greatest acid house album ever released. But it sounds decidedly different than everything else that they did, and I know a lot of that was part of the sound that we were bringing, you know, really in those first, you know, editions of Electronic Air, which at the time, did we start with the name Electronic Air? I remember when we sat around a table, and I think it was at Steven's place.
I think we didn't have it. I think we came up with it pretty quickly. We needed a name. And actually, I
remember writing down Electronic Airwaves because we were compiling our lists. Yeah. And I remember, George, you took a look at it and you just crossed out waves.
Yeah.
So what did we just call it? Electronic Air? And I think pretty quickly
it's like that bit in the film where they had the Facebook, and they were like, no, you don't need the yeah, we did that. But I think Electronic, I think we nailed it. It worked, and it's, I mean, obviously 25 years later, it worked. It wasn't techno air or something like that, because we were trying to have a broader thing, and we have included all sorts of genres, you know, like the ambient stuff that takes you out of what you, well, I mean, you know, I always use techno in a very, very broad sense.
Yeah.
So people can get real specific about genres, and techno to me just means made with technology, really.
Right.
And in a way, in many ways, it's not even electronic anymore, is it? Because it's digital. It's like in the computer. It's not electronic. Used to mean plugging things in, and they, you know, like Kraftwerk did and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of it now, you never touch a real thing. It's all just simulated. So I think the name stuck. I mean, it's great that it still exists with that name.
I think so too. Yeah, I'm proud of it. And we came from
Brian. I'm so glad you're still there.
Oh, thank you.
Holding it down, you know. And we've had a lot of really good DJs since then too. You know, people have been holding it down pretty well.
I want to finish with one favorite memory that you each have of electronic air. Give me one. All right, you go, Selena.
It was in the old studio. Of course, I can't remember anybody's names, but I know the guy. He played violin, and he played it live.
Kenji Williams.
And with my job, White Swan, he had a CD out. He's like a conductor for a big orchestra, and I've got his CDs downstairs. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And they went to like the State House or the government, in Washington, and did a big deal, Anyway, it was, maybe Raja and Mikey were there because they were regulars on the show, but
oh yeah,
how did they come in? I can't remember. I don't think it was with...
it was with Buddha Bomb, right? Through the whole Family Moon scene?
Okay.
Or maybe that's how he got connected with them.
That's what I was wondering, because he came in talking to you, Brom. But anyway, to get it back...
It was DJ Cause that brought them in.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, DJ Cause. Remember Kenny?
No, I'm just saying there were a lot of people, and I was really into the influence that the music had on everybody, and it brought all these different people together who liked all different types of the music. And then for this guy who just flies in, I didn't know who he was, but somebody brings him in, and he's like, oh, let me play my violin with the electronic music. And I was in there watching him, in the other studio, and going back into the air studio and watching the, electronic stuff going on for the internet. And I was just like, wow, this is so friggin' cool. Look at this. This is taking over. This is so important. This is the best time.
I love it. Yeah, and Kenji Williams, he was recording under the name ABA Structure. He ended up releasing a couple of albums, and then one of his tracks ended up on the very first John Digweed Bedrock mix CD. Okay, George, it's your turn. Hit me with the memory.
This was a silly one, but at one point we, as Pirate Sound System, did put together a party at the Dark Horse in Boulder, where we took over the whole Dark Horse completely.
It's true.
As Pirate Sound System, so not exactly electronic air itself, but very, very related.
It was like a proto electronic air.
Yeah, well, we were doing all sorts of things. So this was kind of the live electronic air, as it were. We were DJing, but no one had ever done the Dark Horse. It was, in actual fact, Stephen got a whole gig out of that went forward to the future, where he was like a regular DJ. But we managed to pack that place out. We were on Pearl Street giving out flyers to say free party at the Dark Horse and stuff like that. But when we got there, we were taking all the light bulbs out of everything and putting up projectors and doing all the light stuff that you'd also do for a party like that. And that's and the crew that came to do that, I think Neil was involved in this as well, became known as the Pirate Light Crew.
Yeah,
but that got
pilot.
That got mispronounced as the Pilot Light Crew, and it has been the Pilot Light Crew ever since, as in what you light a boiler with. So I just thought that was very funny, because it was, and I don't know. There are many memories. To me it was like being in a band, but this was a real crew, and so it just went across everything. We kind of, but I was really living for the fact that we were a techno crew doing what we wanted, all over the place. Yeah, that was it. That was it. But anyway, I remember the Pilot Light Crew as being a funny little glitch.
Yeah.
Other stuff is just when we'd get together for pledge drives and stuff, and we had a good group of people. It was just so fun.
It was. Yeah. And that started to kind of come apart when we stopped doing the shows as a crew, right? And started shifting into doing the shows more independently. And George, I think you went back to England, so you were kind of the first one to leave, and Steven moved back to Michigan, and I think Dave just got bored because he had other art and music to go make. So, you know, and he and I went off and did Radio Valve for several years. So that like took the whole internet thing that we were doing, you know, with Electronic Air, and took it a different direction. And then Steven's the only co-founder to ever come back, right? Because he left and came back. Selena, you and I were the ones that stuck in for the long haul and saw, you know, multiple iterations of other crew members that came in, but it was never quite that same vibe again, because then it was just kind of everyone's independent production versus the collective, right?
Yeah.
Well, you know, some of what I was thinking about was Buddha Bomb coming on board. You know, he was a fanboy. I remember the night he called me at the station, and I was spinning with Matter and DJ Cause. We were doing a weekly webcast on Radio Valve called Our Sphere, and then they became sort of my de facto new crew after, you know, the Electronic Air crew had kind of gone their own directions, and so we were all spinning together for Electronic Air. And I remember Jim Buddha Bomb calling the station during one of the shows and saying, "Hey, I love this music, you know, and I travel all over the world and I hear this music everywhere except in the United States, you know." And he's like, I've got all these CDs that I've bought in, you know, different places. And I said, "Well, bring it on down, man. Bring down some of your favorite stuff and let's talk about it." He's like, "What, you mean like to the station?" I said, "Yeah, we'll get you on a microphone. We'll talk about the music." And he's like, "Really? You can do that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we can do that. Come on down." and before you knew it, he was a regular. He would just come and hang out with us every time we were there spinning records. And eventually he just became part of the crew and learned how to DJ as well, and became one of my music students when I was teaching computer audio at DU.
I mean, that changed his life.
George and I were talking a little bit earlier about some of our honorary members, right? So, of course, Neil was one of them. The multicast
and
guys,
Jill.
Right? And Jill, yeah, that's right.
And then who did you say?
The multicast guys. So Dave Alex, who's now one of our current producers, right? So which is kind of ironic in a way. I mean, it's like it took him all these years to finally actually land a real slot on the show. And I think we would have brought him on board at any time. But, you know, Dave Alex, Nathan Jantz, you know, the other couple of names that it came to mind for me were DJ Nitro.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Billy.
And he came down for our 20th anniversary and spun a set.
And he's still around. He's still in the Boulder area, I think.
Yeah, I talk to him. I talk to him regularly.
Oh, okay, yeah. I see the odd post. I see the odd post out there. So.
And the other one I was thinking of was Clark of Saturn.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you know, there were a lot of folks that were part of the scene at that time that weren't necessarily directly involved in the show, but who were influential on us.
And Amy,
absolutely.
And Kelly and
wife.
Even and Kelly.
Yeah, Kelly.
Even obviously,
Stacy B.
Stacy.
And Stephen and I were also talking about Hyperial.org and the Mountain Raves list. You know, that was those were some of our early dedicated you know, web stream listeners, and they helped to circulate the word because, you know, Hyperial at that time, you know, it had all of these different, you know, BBSs, all these different groups. And so there was, you know, San Francisco raves, Chicago raves, New York raves, you know, mountain raves. And so once the word got out through V-Rave, you know, the chat room, all of a sudden, you know, that was where a huge influx, I think, of our listenership came through.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I remember DJ Dub coming in and playing with us on one of those early shows, and we really hit it off because at that time drum and bass was still so fresh, and particularly the whole sort of that what became famous as that logical progression sound, you know, that LTG Bookham became famous for, but that's not what it was called at that time. It's just that was happening, and there are all these different labels. So one of them that George turned me on to that I didn't mention, and didn't play in any of those previous shows, so I should play it in this one, is this classic right here.
Oh yeah, Omni Trio, yeah. There was at that time there was a lot of quite very musical stuff.
Yeah,
like with the jazz soul kind of. Yeah,
Renegade Snares is the one that stands out.
And
for
they
me.
were one. Omni Trio were definitely one of those. Yeah. Photek again. Photek was like that, but was kind of a bit more atmospheric. And there was one Photek track that had some samples on there that sounded like something like the U.S. Air Force coming across a UFO at some point. Yeah, UFO, and they're like, "What is that? What's that over there? There it is again."
That's it.
Yeah, and that's a brilliant classic. But
that's right. It's called UFO.
Yeah, and what more than if you spot a UFO, what more than some abstract drum and bass to put under that?
That's right.
There's no doubt about it. There's some type of strange flashing red light ahead. It's yellow. I saw a yellow tinge in it too. Weird. It appears to be maybe moving a little bit this way. It's brighter than it has been. We're picking up heat reflection off the trees. Looking directly overhead, one can see an opening in the trees, plus some broken pine branches on the ground underneath. Looks like some of them came off about 15 to 20 feet up. Straight ahead, in between the tree. There it is again. Watch straight ahead off my flashlight there. So there it is. Right on this position here. Straight ahead, in between the tree. There it is again. Watch straight ahead off my flashlight there. So there it is. Hey, I see it too. Position here, straight ahead, in between the tree. There it is again. Watch straight ahead off my flashlight there. So there it is. Right on this position here, straight ahead, in between the tree. There it is again. Watch straight ahead off my flashlight there. So there it is. Hey, I see it too. Just jump it. Just 710s there. 710s right here in the center. Getting very positive degrees. It's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way. position here. Straight ahead, in between the tree. There it is again. Watch, straight ahead off my flash right there. So there it is. Right up this position here. Straight ahead, in between the tree. There it is again. Watch, straight ahead off my flash right there. So there it is. Hey, I see it too. Right here in the center. We're getting very positive readings. It's coming this way.
Watashi wa Stephen Ironfeather des. Konnichiwa. I'm here in Hokkaido, Japan, sending shout-outs to everybody listening on Electronic Air. It's been a wonderful 25 years. Keep it up, you guys. I miss it, man. I miss you. I miss all the guys. And
oh, man.
It's awesome.
Well, you are missed here for sure.
I think it was cool because it was such a large group of people from different worlds, and we didn't really know each other, you know. And we all came together and started doing these shows, and you had everybody doing, everybody from DJ task to announcing task to promotion. We had guys doing the video feed and audio feeds. I think that was probably before KGNU had online streaming.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. We were the first. We were
yeah, so it was a huge deal. We had a whole crew of guys that were working on different computers in the hallway, trying to make that work, and super exciting.
Yeah, that was transformational for the station, and obviously we were so enthusiastic about it because it was new technology, and no one really understood, what the impact of it would be, but we cut our teeth on it. It was pretty exciting. It felt like it, converged well with the music that we were playing, the backgrounds that we all had. I love that you mentioned that we really didn't know each other then, right? I mean, you had a relationship with Dave, and Selena and I were both already producing at KGNU. It had been for some time, and then you and Dave ended up doing Radio Ping, right?
Yeah. That was thanks to Dr. Proctor.
That's right.
Dr. Proctor was doing a show, and he was friends with Dave. And he kind of made a little invitation to Dave, like, hey, you guys should come do a show, one of my late shows, whatever. So we were so excited, man. We're like prepared that 1 hour show for like weeks, It was so exciting. That inspired me to start taking classes and from the Blues Rooster.
Well, so you mean taking classes at KGNU to learn more about the production?
Yeah, I had to take classes first so I could get my own show, and I started doing a 3 a.m. slot.
Well, let me ask you a couple of things. So, one of the memories that I was reflecting on that has been one that stands out as a really epic experience with the early days of Electronic Air was when we did the full-on webcast with Spiral Tribe and the Spaz Collective, coming down to the studio and just, taking over, basically.
That was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and those were connections that you had, so tell me a little bit about how did we even end up doing that?
You probably managed it to get us a 6 hour slot, right?
Yeah.
and it was like the perfect storm where like suddenly these guys are rolling through the country. They flew into the East Coast, and there's like one guy from Holland or a couple people from Holland, some people from England, like the Spiral Tribe and the Network 23 crew.
Yeah.
I think a guy or two from France. And
that's right.
And then the Spaz crew, which are based out of San Francisco, I've known them and been in contact with them via email chat list and so on like this for years. And I've been big fans of their work because they're really productive, doing these amazing events, and they're a large collective of people with a warehouse and buses and all kinds of stuff. And the same thing with Spiral Tribe and Network 23, over in Europe, they were doing massive events.
Yeah. Legendary.
Doing crazy stuff, like they had huge armored trucks that would roll through Bosnia and do dance parties for the people and stuff, just weird stuff at that time.
Yeah.
The whole French underground techno scene, huge parties in the mountains with this hard French techno sound. And so then they'll announce that, hey, we're going to come to America, land on the East Coast and be on a fleet of vehicles traveling west to Burning Man. And I was like, wow, are you coming through Colorado? Like, yeah, we can. I'm like, well, please, please come through. And they came through, and some of them stayed in their vehicles and camped out. And some stayed with David, and we kind of farmed people out.
Yeah.
And some stayed at the office we had there.
That's right.
It was so much fun for me because I was at the office just watching these guys like, can we please practice our records on your turntables? I'm like, yes, cool. And I recorded some of the sets and just hanging out and soaking up their energy. And then we had that 6-hour slot that weekend. I was like, oh my God, I was so perfect. And they brought all their gear and records. And
yeah.
And at the same time, I think we also booked Nebula 9.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Nebula 9, the two local Colorado heroes.
Yes.
Stars came down and did a set. Jim brought his gear down, and
that's right.
And we had everybody in the studio, and I was like, oh my God, it was so much fun.
When we started the show, we had some resistance, obviously, from the station.
Yeah.
And, there were some people who, Catherine Gullery, who was the music director at that time, I think she was very open to it, but she also got the sense pretty quickly. She's like, whoa, we're being overrun by this stuff. It's like, we got DJs, during every hour of each day, every week, who are, injecting this music into all of our other programming, because it's part of the freeform thing. And I think pretty quickly she realized, okay, now we've got all these like-minded people, and each of them independently are pushing to have some kind of feature program, for the show.
Yeah.
It might have been, a self-preservation technique to say, let's just give it to them so at least we can cordon it over here to just these 2 hours.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it makes sense. And because I remember that's a tough nut there in Boulder, because that's a bluegrass, banjo, folk music scene dominates there and still does, I imagine. So the guys come in playing, electronic beats and synthesizers. Oh my God, that's like horrible.
Right.
So yeah, I think it was a tough fight, and you definitely kicked ass at that. Did you write like a massive report paper that was like detailed?
I did. Yeah.
I remember that was epic.
Put it in a binder and everything. Yeah. Had a very formal proposal for the show.
Yeah. That was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we wanted to make it real, and we did. So you're the only founding co-producer of the show who's actually left and come back.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah, it's true. I went to Michigan for a few years, came back. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got to have 2 stints of Iron Feather in the lineage of electronic air.
Yeah, I'm addicted.
So tell me a little bit about, what were your key influences?
Well, I guess listening on the radio, hearing stuff like, 808 State and all that early stuff, occasionally on the shows in Boston. And also being in Detroit, I was going to college in Michigan, and I was listening to Detroit radio, and they had Jeff Mills, the Wiz, doing his wild shows, which is mixing up disco and early house and early techno, and wicked shows, man. I don't know if you can probably access them online.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you can. So
I'm listening to that during my college years, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And I happened to be in a good area at the time. Dale Charles started doing his Acid House night in 1988. And I was I started attending those religiously. And then I went back to Michigan. And in Michigan, that's in year 2000. That's when Carl Craig started the Detroit Electronic Music Festival.
Yeah.
Went down there and met with him. And I'm like, hey, I do this zine. Can I come in and get access pass? And he's like, okay, sure. So I'm like one of the few people go to access pass for that thing. And I went everywhere, videotaped, met all these people. And the Underground Resistance guys, they knew me because I was corresponding with Mad Mike in the past. And they gave me, all the reporters, get off the stage now. You can stay. You know, I'm like, really honored.
It's beautiful.
And in the early raves in Detroit, you know, it was back when Richie Houghton called himself Richie Rich.
Mm-hmm.
He'd give out the Richie Rich dollars and stuff because he was basically nobody. Nobody ever heard of him.
Yeah.
Some kid from Windsor. And he'd come over and he was honored to do something before he was producing. And I was a huge Kevin Saunderson fan. And I met Mike Huckabee. He was working at Record Time Records. I was a fanboy geek about him. Mm-hmm. I'd go there and just be like, wow, I'm so cool to hear him talk. And he's showing records around. And I met him later with you at the Lunar Lodge. I was really,
you know, that early era when we were really coming together and you know, bringing the building the crew effectively, right? I know that we had a couple other folks that were honorary sort of early, you know, co-founding members. They didn't really ever stick with us and they didn't help us. You know, they weren't KGNU volunteers, but they were routinely part of what we were doing in, you know, sort of this variety of things that we got involved in, which included Pirate Sound System and some of those events and, you know, KGNU benefits and that kind of stuff. So I've got a few people in mind, but I want to hear you rattle off a few names of who are some of the other early folks who were involved in helping us sort of gain traction with the show.
Well, for sure, Mountain Raves crew. That was a email list. It started, I don't know when, probably 1990 or something like that. But I think it started was one big list based out of New York, and it was like for the whole country. But then as the rave scene blossomed, it broke into little groups like the Mountain Raves, the San Francisco Raves, the New York Raves, broke off different lists. And the Mountain Raves guys are just all sweethearts, and they, you know, always joking around, having fun, talking about parties, sharing. I remember back then it was so exciting. It's like, wow, the orb. Can you recognize the samples? Who can, like, what's that sample? You know, that was so much fun trying to guess the samples that, you know, 808 State. What is that? Is that a loon? You know? Oh my God, it was so much. It was like so innocent and fun and exciting. But the Mountain Raves crew, which is a big group of people, you know, Wally, of course, he kind of manages it now, I think. Those guys are always supportive, and I'd hit them up for guest DJs and tell them about the shows. Please listen in, and they'd spread it around. So those guys are great. And then you had the Mother Earth Sound System, very lovely collective of people, and they're still doing stuff. It's very cool.
Yeah.
And of course, I was friends with Jillian and Mike E.
Mm-hmm.
I was working at Penny Lane like in 92 or 93, and they walk in with a sunshine flyer. And I'm like, oh my God, what's this? And they're like, oh, we're starting up a house night at the Marquee. And I'm like, dude, sit down. Let's have a coffee and talk. So I took my lunch break and talked to them, and we became friends. And I'd always hang out with their parties and meet all the DJs and all their people and see the scene behind the curtain. And I was like, I was hooked, you know, so much fun. But for people, yeah, so I'd hit up all these people I'd meet and say, hey, can you come down to the studio and do a show, or can you give me a cassette or something or whatever? And everybody was really into it and supportive, and that was a blast, you know.
Was a blast.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were formative times for sure. It's almost astonishing to me that, you know, 2.5 decades later, we're still doing it. But awesome. and no, you know, from my perspective, I mean, I have no desire to slow down. In fact, I wish I could dedicate even more time to it, but it's challenging, you know, as the years go on.
Yeah, it's a lot of production work. Yeah,
it can be. Yeah, but you know, I love it for sure. Okay, man, you got to tell me, name 1 or 2 tracks that when you think of the beginning of electronic air, what are a couple of tracks that stand out as those were the clear stunners, like from an early set or, you know?
Well, for me, like when I was in Detroit, I was hearing these like banging hard songs, you know, like Richie Houghton and all those guys. And they're playing like this hard stuff from Holland, not gabber, but it was just like Rotterdam sound, the early Rotterdam. It's kind of like the new beat stuff. It's kind of rough and raw and weird. And I liked a lot of that stuff. But then a lot of you guys in Colorado were all playing like house music and kind of softer stuff. And not you specifically, but some people I met like in Denver, like the Pound Boys, for example, who I love. These guys are playing a lot of like soft vocals. And I'm like, what's this? You know, I was like, oh my God, so different from Detroit where the hard stuff is. But for specific tunes, I mean, like the Orb, I'm still a big Orb fan. All their stuff when they had like thrash and just blew my mind. You know, the whole Orb, like the ambient stuff and the mixing of sound effects, and it's done so well. Yeah. That blew my mind. Jeez, I mean, it's so much stuff. So what were some of your top tunes?
When I think of really those first couple shows, so one that comes to mind was one that George had turned me on to. Off of Moving Shadow, and that's Omni Trio. And
cool. Nice.
You know, they had a couple of great remixes of the track Renegade Snares. You know, one of those was remixed by Foul Play, you know, and Rob High, the guy that, you know, behind Moving Shadow. I mean, he that was just that, you know, to me that was the beginning of that, what Bookham made famous, you know, with logical progression, you know, that really smooth, intelligent drum and bass kind of sound. But, you know, Omni Trio was among the first, along with Moving Shadow. I think that kind of cultivated that sound. And then the other end of the spectrum was Aphex Twin and, you know, his side project AFX. And I remember the very first show playing, you know, I was playing like right after George, and I just bought Hangable Auto Bulb, the EP, from Nathan Jantz and Dave Alex, right? The multicast guys. Dave Alex, of course, is now one of our regular producers in the current lineup, you know? Cool. So, you know, I had just come from Albums Up, and I couldn't wait to play this because I knew I was one of the few people in town who actually owned a copy of it. Yeah. And in those days, it wasn't like you could just go download, you know, a file online. You know, if you didn't have the record, you weren't playing it. So.
You're the only guy in the state.
So Laughable Butane Bob, that track by AFX off of Hangable Auto Bulb EP, number one, that was that to me will always have this indelible stamp that reminds me of the early origins of electronic air. And then, you know, one more, I realized that all of these references are drum and bass, which is kind of funny, but the other one that I was thinking of is Photek. You know, he had a release that was all in Japanese, right? So it was impossible to know, like, what are these tracks called? You know, I didn't even know who the artist was for, you know, the first couple of years. But I knew I really liked whatever that chimey high synth progression, you know, track was that I later discovered that it was called Complex, and is the B-side of The Seven Samurai. Yeah, those come to mind. Another one that I'd been thinking of also is The Legion of Green Men. You know, that was on a +8 release, but it was a very unique kind of sound at that time. It was kind of down tempo, but in an IDM kind of way.
Yeah. Nice, man. Yeah, so much good. It's amazing how it's the same equipment, but these guys are making such a unique sound out of it. You know, you have a 303 and a drum machine and a keyboard or whatever, but it's like each guy has a totally unique, cool sound.